Welcome back, ladies, gentlemen, and all else, to this year's Halloween special, the 8th one in a row. This tradition started all the way back in 2013, and here we are today in 2021, as I have collected 10 excellent short stories for us all to enjoy on this very special Halloween night. These aren't necessarily ranked by scare factor, they are simply 10 really good short stories in my eyes, so bear that in mind. It truly is the season of autumn, the season where trees turn yellow, orange, and red, and where you are unable to track where the roads in the forest begin and end. This is autumn, and tonight is Halloween. I hope you stay safe, secure, and enjoy the following stories. I highly recommend you go down in the description of this video, follow the links, and read each of these 10 stories for yourself, and give these fantastic authors kind words for their efforts. Each of these stories are great in my opinion, and I hope you will like them too. With that said, there is no point in waiting any further. Now begins this year's Halloween special, as we read the top 10 creepypastas of 2021. Enjoy. Number 10. Mirrored. In the universe, there are two intertwining dimensions. Our dimension, which we live in, and the opposite dimension, where exact duplicates of ourselves live. Both versions of ourselves do the exact same thing as the other at the same time. The only time the duplicates are able to see each other are when they walk past a reflective object, such as a mirror, some windows, spoons, etc. When you try to pass through to the other side, your reflection, your doppelganger, blocks your path to prevent you from crossing the fields of space. This is because one side is filled with pain, suffering, and many types of distressing events. The other is filled with happiness, where nothing is a worry. The only question is, what side are you on to begin with? Number 9. Someone must be home. As a child, my grandmother Julie would always tell me spooky stories. Most of them were obviously fake, but there is one that she still insists is true, even to this day, as do the others involved. As a new mother of twins, Julie lived in her sister's basement in Queens, New York. She was still out of work taking care of her newborn daughters and would often spend her days in her makeshift apartment until someone, with the ability to speak, came home from work. One day, as she was putting the twins down for a nap, she heard the front door open. Someone must be home, she thought, but the door never closed. Puzzled, she climbed the creaky steps, careful not to wake her daughters. As she reached the top floor, she not only found the door closed tight, but locked and deadbolted from the inside. "Hello?" she called out, but there was no answer. She remained alone with the twins until her sister came home hours later. The next day, around the same time, the door opened again, and this time, she heard it close loudly. Someone definitely must be home this time, she thought, and called her sister's name up the stairs. No answer. A little unsettled, she climbed the steps once more, only to find the door locked and the house empty. This continued for days. Every day, around the same time, Julie would hear the door open and close, and as the days progressed, footsteps became audible. Day after day, they would get closer to the basement, and eventually made it down the stairs into her makeshift apartment. But every day, she would look, and the house would be empty. She became more and more frightened as the days went by. Her sister, of course, did not believe her. After a week or so of this, she and her sister were with a few friends at the house. Julie brought up the incidents, stating that every day, around this time in fact, she would hear the door open, and footsteps down the stairs to the basement. "Maybe it will happen today," she said, a little hopeful. She wanted to prove to her sister that something was happening. After a few moments of silence, there was a crash, and what sounded like someone frantically running from up the basement stairs and up to the second floor of the house. The startled women went running to see what had happened, but Julie's sister made it into the hallway first and screamed. They found her at the base of the stairs, trembling as she looked up at them. "Someone's in my room," she said, horrified. The police were called, but nothing was found. All doors were still locked, all windows closed. They couldn't even figure out what caused the crash. From there, the noises stopped, but growing up in the basement, the twins would sometimes smile and wave at invisible visitors, always around the same time of day. Number 8. Progress. I am stuck in a long, winding hallway that seems to have no end except for the wall at the end, the mirror. I run as far as I could, hoping to travel a far enough distance to touch that mirror. But no matter how long, how far I run, I never ever seem to move. The mirror, however, displays a silhouette that is continuously growing before me, as if I was actually moving towards it. I thought it was just a window, with someone on the other side rapidly dashing towards me, building up speed to the extent that its silhouette grew substantially. I never have actually seen it reach the mirror, let alone reach me, because I always woke up before that even happened. I've had these dreams since the incident with my parents, where I accidentally sent both of my parents to the hospital due to my awful attempts to construct a few chairs. My parents had acknowledged my inability to do anything right. They told me that I would never do anything useful in my life if I kept making mistakes like the ones I usually make, and hated me ever since. I never got over the habit of making those mistakes. I never got over the fact that I was just useless. When I was 14, I went to see a psychiatrist after school who gave me an explanation why I had those dreams and what they meant. These dreams represent my lack of self-esteem, caused by my inability to acknowledge what I've done right in my life. Although I don't feel like I'm making any progress running in the hallway, I actually am, running fast and swiftly towards my destination. When the mirror finally breaks, shatters at the end of that hall, it wouldn't be the silhouette who did it. It would be me. I just had to accomplish something in my life. Yes, that made me joyful. But even that didn't satisfy me. My parents still hated me, and I still made mistakes. My parents still hated me, and I still made mistakes. That night, I had the dream again. I ran through the hallways just like usual, and the silhouette grew bigger, but I still went nowhere. But instead of seeing a usual man running at the other side of the mirror, I saw the same man, holding up a knife in his hand. But I didn't hold a knife in my hand. This time, in only a matter of seconds, the opposite side burst, and the mirror shattered into shards, flying across the empty hallway. The other me was gone, but I surpassed the flying shards. I shattered that mirror. I did it. But I don't remember accomplishing anything in my life that could have possibly triggered this ending. And then I woke up again, right after the dream's ending, standing up on the concrete floor. My parents lay dead and lifeless on the floor, slits in their throats and blood running down from their eyes. Their faces displayed numerous emotions like shock, awe, surprise, anguish, anger, sadness, and maybe a little bit of excitement. I felt dizzy and strange as well, but then my mind took hold of reality once again. The bloody knife in my hand waved and rattled frequently when I finally comprehended the actions I just took. I have finally made progress in my life. Number 7. Grass. I'm sure you're fond of winter, when the crisp season of fall abruptly cuts to an end, and quickly the dark grey clouds in the heavens above form over our heads, letting a white, soft mass of perfectly frozen snowflakes ease off of their non-existent shoulders. This snow can vary from soft, gentle and delicate, creating but a thin layer of pure white on top of the cold ground, to harsh, unmerciful storms of furious cold and wind, throwing the unwilling snow in every which direction. But alas, it seems as though us feeble humans have forgotten about what becomes trapped underneath the sparkling, crystalline precipitation every season. What remains living off the frozen ground, cut off and deafened to the world above. What is left to fender off underneath the blistering blanket of ice? The living, breathing creature that we all neglect as unimportant, who we couldn't care less about. Grass. It may seem silly, but put yourself in that situation. Would living exposed to the winter cold and snow be an enjoyable experience? Most people think that these small blades of green can't feel it, or they've fallen asleep for the winter. That is nonsense. It is scientifically proven that these poor plants stay conscious for every second of the day. Although they do not function physically or emotionally like we do, they are still technically alive. Who knows, these herbaceous plants may be silently mourning when the first winter breeze comes upon them, how they dread the day of the first snowfall that will tragically torture them to the brink of death. Sometimes, after the harsh winds of winter have finished and gone away, and spring abundantly thaws the earth with warmth and rain, you see light brown patches of grass on the lawn. Those are the grass that weren't able to survive the deadly evil cold, and have suffered to the point of death. We merely ignore this, and only care about the looks of the lawn and how ugly it now appears after winter has taken its toll. We are selfish, disgusting creatures who care nothing about the lives of other beings. Things we think aren't correct, that aren't perfect in our minds, no longer have meaning to us. Things that we don't describe as cute, we push off into the dust. We must change our despicable ways before it is too late, before realization arrives much too late to our incompetent minds, and we are faced with consequences in the beyond. Number 6. The Dare. It was a dare for the record books. Anyone who took it was labeled clinically insane by their friends, and would have been carted away to the loony bin. But if anyone was insane that day, it was Thomas Schwartz, known as Tommy to his friends. He not only volunteered to do it, but he was going to do it alone. Standing in the driveway of the Neveserian house, he stood confident. His eyes shifted from window to door, seeking out weaknesses. If he was scared, he didn't show it. Ignoring the cheers of his accomplices, he advanced towards his opponent. The sounds of a lawnmower hitched a ride with the breeze, engulfing the children as they held position. The driveway found itself losing a war with the grass, and the boundary where they separated became unclear. Tommy didn't notice this. His mind was focused upon his goal, and what lay ahead. Cicadas argued with each other while the birds sang the era of summer, but all of this was lost on Thomas as the wood steps underneath his feet moaned with the effort from supporting him. With the doorbell non-functioning and no welcome mat to accommodate him, Tommy pried open the screen door, who also had some complaining to do, and reached for the brass knob. As his thumb began pushing down the lever, time held its breath in anticipation. His friends had long ceased their cheers and merely stood where it was safe, letting the sun extract sweat from their pores. Even the birds and cicadas had paused in their conversation to study him. The door wailed as it allowed him entry, and again when the house had engulfed him. With the door in between his friends and him, the fear crept into his face. The path to being a schoolyard legend certainly isn't the easiest. Nothing had shambled into sight clanking chains, though that didn't alleviate Thomas's fears. His goal resided on the second story, and the faster he made it there, the less likely he would end up being killed by horrors unknown. With every fiber of his being resisting him, Thomas advanced through the house. The echo of his footfalls seemed to resonate throughout the entire house as they collided with the carpet which had cushioned the heads of the 3 families that lived there. Upon passing the foyer, white-sheeted figures assaulted his vision, making him leap. However, the furniture did not attack, perhaps not hungry for small children. As his heart safely descended from his throat, Thomas had reinforced his nerves and began walking again. The stairs curved at a sharp turn near the middle. A small groan issued from Thomas as nightmarish scenarios played out in his mind. The fact that this particular staircase was used as a bowling alley for severed heads didn't exactly appeal to him either. No ghost could compare to the taunts and teases of his fellow colleagues, however, so the staircase was only a minor nuisance. With each step, Thomas's muscles tightened further, trying in vain to prevent the inevitable. His eyes forced his head to turn around the corner, his bowels bracing for release. Nothing came at him. Nothing upon nothing erupted from the hallway. The nothing disemboweled him and gouged his eyes out with extraordinary non-existence. Ignoring the ball of snakes squirming in his bowels, Thomas approached the far door on the right, the final destination. Tommy couldn't decide whether or not the doors in the hallway being closed were a blessing or a curse. Shifting horrors may lurk in the folds of the unknown, but since they didn't attack, he didn't bother himself with spooking himself. The goal was too close in sight to chicken out. Thomas stretched his hand out to the knob of the final room, and as he did so, the knob shrank from it. Yet the door yielded to him, and he entered the room. The accursed painting was on the far wall, as if expecting him, beckoning him closer into itself, as it had done to so many others. The painting didn't seem like one that would devour the sanity of so many innocents. In fact, it seemed rather innocent itself. No pentagrams or monsters of any kind. The moon's one winking eye felt playful to Thomas, and the row of neat houses made him yearn for his own. No spade-clawed hand bore into his flesh, no clanking chains found their way into his soul. Thomas even forgot what was supposed to frighten him about the house. As he turned to go, he stole one final look back at the painting and smiled. He was ready to rejoin his friends outside. Thomas Schwartz was never found. The children that had urged him to do it waited with all the patience they could muster as the light deepened to orange over the horizon. Eventually, each found their own paths to their houses and mothers, while Thomas's began to worry. None of them talked about what had occurred, not between themselves and not to the police when they interrogated them. When the house was demolished a year later, there was no painting depicting a winking moon amongst the rubble. Number 5. 1483. I had the dream again, the little boy whispered to his brother, shaking him violently awake. I think I really felt it this time. He hugged his older brother tight as the other sat up and rubbed his face. The little boy blinked rapidly to rid himself of the tears in his eyes as his brother rubbed reassuring circles into his back. It was just a dream, Richard, he insisted to the 9-year-old. It's nothing to worry about. But it was scary, Richard protested. The lopsided man came into the room and he grabbed me by the throat until I couldn't breathe. Richard? His brother growled at the sound of the man's given moniker. I told you to stop calling him that. The boy pulled away and crawled to the end of the bed, lower lip trembling in a pout. Well, that's just what he is, he mumbled. His shoulders, they're at different heights and that makes him look really funny. I know that, but it's still not nice to say. His brother scolded the boy with a sigh, crawling after him. He wrapped an arm around the younger boy and let him lean on his shoulder for comfort. When are you going to be king, Edward? The little boy asked with a frown, turning his head to look up at the 12-year-old. Soon, Edward said, getting to his feet. It will be soon. He wandered over to the window, looking out over the grounds of the tower. It was quiet, dead quiet, but Edward was certain the guards were alert at their posts. I'm sure of it. You said it would be soon when I got here, and that was 2 months ago, Richard pointed out, his expression changing from that of disappointment to that of irritation. And before that, you were here a month already. It's not up to me, Edward called back, refusing to look back at his brother. He hung his head and let out a heavy breath, fists unclenching. We're here until they coronate me. They're going to have to do it sometime. They can't keep us in here forever. What if they never do? Richard asked, sitting cross-legged. What if the lopsided— He is our uncle, Richard. You need to stop calling him that no matter how he looks, Edward growled, spinning on his heel and glaring at the boy. I bet he wouldn't be very happy to hear you say that about him. I'm sorry, Richard said, looking down at his feet as a flush covered his face. Edward let out another sigh and climbed back into bed. It was just a dream, Richard. Please, let me go back to sleep and get some rest yourself. We'll ask about coronation tomorrow. Richard's eyes lit up in the moonlight. Really? You promise? He asked. Edward laughed and nodded, patting the spot on the bed beside him. Of course. Now, come on. Richard worked himself back under the covers, and the brothers fell back asleep. In August of 1483, Edward V and his brother Richard stopped coming out of the Tower of London. Edward V's coronation never occurred, despite his placement in the tower assumed to be for that purpose. Some claim that their uncle, Richard III, spine deformed by scoliosis, murdered them to secure his place on the throne. To this day, no one quite knows for certain. Number 4. I dream of names and cancer. When I was 4, I killed my first ant. It didn't have a name. Of that, I was absolutely certain. My own name isn't important to you right now, although it is likely you'll learn some version of it soon. I think you'll end up learning a lot about me in the coming days. Some will be true, most will be false. There is a crucial element that will be missed, simply because it is unknowable to anyone else. Anyone but me. But I'm going to share it with you. At the age of 19 as a soldier, I killed my first person. He had a name. Of that, too, I was absolutely certain. And he changed me. My act of violence led me to learn who he was and what he meant to others. And at the same time, I learned something essential about myself, something I was unprepared for. I recoiled in profound, uncomprehending terror. Today, I work in a hospice. No one there knows what I've done. No one there knows who I really am. They think I'm there to work, which is technically true. But I have more tasks than those given to me by supervisors. One particular task, one I've prepared for and dreamed about, is to be done today. Today is when I learn whether or not I'm going to die. Today is my 522nd birthday. Believe it, don't believe it, it doesn't matter to me. When I killed my first person at the age of 19, I did more than take his life. I assumed parts of him. He was a left-handed blacksmith's apprentice named Pierre Gaultier. The moment he breathed his final breath, my left hand lost its sinister clumsiness. I instantaneously understood the basics of metalworking. And I learned his name. I felt his name. It was as familiar to me as my own. It was the most horrifying moment of my life, the most disorienting. And that night, using my new dexterous left hand, I tried to cut my own throat. The blade passed over my skin as if it were iron. I later hanged myself from a beam in an abandoned alley, only to dangle uselessly for 3 days before I was found and cut down by a local derelict. I begged him to help me take my life, but I didn't have enough money to make it worth his while. When I killed him in a rage of frightened and confused desperation, I absorbed his alcoholism. The following centuries were a haze of blood and drink. I've absorbed countless talents, countless traits, countless vices, but the names aren't countless. There are 7,339 names inside me now, 7,339 clusters of memories to haunt me. This all leads to today. For 500 years, I've stayed under the radar. I have hidden in the shadows and killed and killed and killed, hoping to absorb any knowledge someone might have of another man like me, another man who shares my curse. But I'm unique. No one is like me. Every open throat and subsequent transfer of name and ability has yielded nothing useful. Nothing useful, that is, until last month. He was a man called Gustav Brennerson, and along with his name, he transferred to me his influenza. It was the first time I have ever been sick. The hospice here has 44 beds. 41 are filled. 41 opportunities. I dream of names and cancer every night while I'm taunted by the false death of sleep. Tonight, wherever it is I lay my head, as it seethes with 41 new names, I pray it seethes with something new, something malignant, something terminal, something that will end these centuries of hideous wandering. I dream of being eaten alive. Number 3. Sound asleep. Sleep is a wonderful thing, wouldn't you agree? Everyone loves to fall into a deep slumber and wake up feeling completely refreshed and full of life. The average person spends 1/3 of their life sleeping. That is roughly 194,820 hours. While it varies from person to person, a sound louder than 40 decibels is more than enough to keep someone awake. However, once the subject is asleep, it can take more than 60 decibels to wake them up. This is just louder than a dishwasher or dryer running if you were seated next to it. Luckily, most things aren't that loud, such as a human footstep. If you were lying down and someone stepped right past you, it would reach about 20 decibels. Or a tapping on your windows, reaching just 10 decibels. Especially something like a blade being drawn from a sheath, reaching just 17 decibels. Oh, I'm rambling. Anyway, sweet dreams! Number 2. Eden Canyon. Eden Canyon is a story about driving at night and what can go horribly wrong if one isn't paying attention to the road and ends up somewhere they'd rather not be. After a long day of work hours away from home, the author of this story began their nighttime drive back in what was bound to be a long, boring, and uneventful journey in the dark. Barely registering that the weather had turned rather foggy outside due to zoning out, the author clumsily missed their turnoff. Quickly realizing their mistake, they pulled out their phone and turned on their GPS app in order to figure out where to head next. They lamented not having had the app on in the first place, but figured they would have been clever enough to remember their way home without help. The GPS routed a way back, and the next possible turnoff turned out to be quite far away, labeled Eden Canyon. The Eden Canyon exit itself was nothing special, a simple turnoff that took one to a random road leading into some obscure town. However, as soon as the author pulled off from the freeway, they noticed something was off. On the side of the road, several cars simply stood on the side of the exit. Stopping at a nearby stop sign, the author glanced further down the road. On the left, all that would be necessary would be a left turn, another left, and there, they'd be on their way home. On the right, though, were many more seemingly abandoned cars on both sides of the road, causing this particular road to appear rather sinister. Being a big horror buff, the author couldn't help but be overcome with curiosity of where this road might lead and decided to ignore their GPS, a decision they would soon come to regret as they drove further along Eden Canyon, the fog growing all the more oppressive around their car and the road growing more narrow. More cars appeared on both sides of the road, and from what the author could see, they were all empty. Perhaps some kind of event was going on further down the road. Suddenly, two bright headlights appeared in the rearview mirror. The author was not alone anymore, which felt relieving, yet they wondered if perhaps this car was the reason so many others had been driven off the road. The fact that the car sped up and closed in on the author's car did not help as their worry grew. What if the driver was violent or dangerous? Once another lane presented itself and this mysterious car began switching lanes, the author quickly pulled over on the side of the road and held their breath. The car zoomed straight past them. Then, it abruptly halted and stood completely still. Waiting in anticipation, it took the author a moment to realize they should have looked further down the road. There, on the road, stood a dark, imposing shape, moving with a strange shuffle. The shape resembled a man with some sort of large thing on his back. This man lumbered over to the driver's side of the car in front of the author and looked into the window, twitching his head slightly before moving backwards as the car door opened and the young driver exited, simply standing there, doing nothing. Then, the strange man lifted a hand and placed it on the driver's head, a large, inhuman hand that seemed to consume the driver's head. The driver remained inexplicably motionless, until the odd man squeezed. The driver flailed for a moment before dropping his limbs as his head was brutally crushed by the hand of the man. No, this was no man. This was something else. It then began making its way towards the author's car, dragging the other driver's corpse alongside it. The author quickly crouched down, hoping not to be noticed by the creature, hoping and praying that the thing would not look down. Just then, the fog cleared for a moment, allowing the creature to be viewed clearly. Its face was wrinkled and bloated, with a crooked nose, a smacking mouth, and bulging eyes. What had first seemed to be a backpack on its back appeared to be a hump of flesh, with metal pieces protruding from it, some seeming to be car parts or random scraps of metal. Strange, as the cars lining the road seemed to have been untouched. What may have at one point been a man was now something completely different. Its hand hit the window as it scanned the inside of the car. Skinny, wrinkled fingers with massive claws tapped against the glass, and then the creature's eyes locked with the author, widening as it stared into the author's very soul. Without warning, the author felt controlled as they sat up completely. This was why the other driver had also gotten out of their car. Their body had been controlled. Leaning towards their window against their own will, the author was now face to face with this monster, unable to look away from its piercing eyes. It stared at them for what felt like hours, until it looked down at what was in its other hand, back at the author, and smiled maliciously. It then turned away, dragging the other driver with it, and disappeared down the road, behind a large truck. The author could finally move again, and hesitated for a short moment before aggressively U-turning and heading back up the road. Luckily, no cars met them on the way back, and soon enough, they were back where they started and on their way home. The creature must have spared the author due to it already having found its meal for the night, and once the author got home, they called the police, leaving an anonymous tip that someone had been killed by Eden Canyon Road. Nothing ever came of it. No newspaper articles, nor updates. Nothing. How close the author came to being the one to lose their life that fateful night. If only the other car had not driven past them. They would have instead become the victim of whatever creature they encountered that night. Now, whenever the author drives in the dark, they pick their roads much more carefully. Number 1. Night. The light went out faster than Steve could react. The water was colder than ice in an instant, and fear pervaded his body like a curse. His face broke the water's surface, and he ran out of the pond. A wolf's howl was all he heard as he ran in his swim trunks down an empty West 15th Street. The problem had been here for longer than the 5 minutes it took to get home, indeed much longer. The problem had been there since the dawn of time, whenever that was, for this was the dusk of time, and Steve knew that well. Water was the only thing he thought that could help him think of something during this dreadful time. Dusk had been coming for years. No one knew what to do to stop it, only that if you were outside, you were at risk. Steve was barely inside when the sound rang through his head. It sounded like the hissing of a snake, but not quite. He looked at his watch. Somehow, in a matter of 5 minutes, it had become complete midnight. The dusk of time was upon them, and Steve was the last person to say goodbye. The sun rose over the empty land. There was nothing. As quick as it had come, it had gone. It was a good story, said the first. It would have made an excellent book, said the second. The story was so short. Chapter 1, Sludge, was little more than a pamphlet, but it was longer than the remainder of the book. The story did pick up quickly, however, especially towards the end. The last chapter was only a few millionths the length of the first, but it contained more than any other, specifically with one character named Man. It was sad that the story had to end so shortly, as now another one had to be created. But after all, what's another few ants' lives to a human anyway? And there you have it. Those were the collection of 10 excellent creepypastas for 2021. I hope you enjoyed these stories just as much as I did, and I hope you all have a wonderful, memorable, and special Halloween night. Thank you so much for joining me once more for another year, and thank you all so much for helping me reach 300,000 subscribers this year. That truly means a lot, and I really appreciate it. Thank you for joining me for this Halloween, and for your continued support. It really means a lot to me. With that said, I believe that should be all for tonight. I hope you all have a great time. Thanks for watching, everyone. Stay awesome. And happy Halloween. Goodbye.
Surprise! Hey.